So you're saying even like being like, oh, we'll fix it in post. I'm in a rock band, and we constantly joke about, we'll just fix it in post. But we don't actually ever, because we don't have anyone with that ability. So it's kind of like the recording is the recording.
It's almost just like a coping mechanism then, to like
exactly.
just be okay with it not being perfect, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
That's really fun. So Julian, before we dive into our conversation, I have like a list of icebreaker questions which you couldn't prepare for. Also, if you hear a chicken in the background, I'm on a farm. Just complete like open, what do you call it? Like very open and honest about where I am. So yeah, he's going off. It seems to be his time. I don't know why he picks 4 in the afternoon, but in any case, like I said, some icebreaker questions, some rapid fire questions, just to get to know you a bit better. Don't think about them too hard, just sort of answer what comes to mind. There's no follow-up, so we'll just move through them quite quickly.
Cool.
First one, after a really tiring day, how do you spend your evening?
Mostly either watching series or playing some kind of game. I like to play games that are immersive, or watch a series that's immersive, because I like to break away from like reality for a bit.
Nice.
So mostly that, yeah.
And then do you prefer tea or coffee, and how do you take it?
I prefer coffee, and I have it completely black.
Cool. And then what is a really good work-related book that you have read recently?
My favorite work-related book is a book called The Phoenix Project. I'm not sure if you've heard too much about it. That really helped change my mindset, I think, a lot on terms of like how a project should go together and how everyone's different roles are, because I think there's so much relatable stuff in there. But yeah, that was pretty good.
And then what is something you wish existed but doesn't yet?
Teleportation, for sure. Just be so easy just to get around, go visit places.
I get that one a lot, and I think it's one of those things that's in high demand, but not many people know how to satisfy that demand just yet. But cool, then last question. What is something that's cost you less than R1,000, but was the best investment most recently?
Yo, less than R1,000. That makes that hard.
What would you answer if is there something that's more than R1,000 that you would answer to?
Probably like, I mean, so less than R1,000. I say I gave like some cash towards Candace's banjo, which I think has given me a lot of joy, because it means that we can do something else together. So that's been great.
Cool. That's cool.
More than R1,000, I bought myself a guitar, which was super good, and that also kept me occupied, which keeps me happy.
Cool. I will take both of those answers. I think that's very interesting. Banjos could go either way. I think you could either regret that decision or like really enjoy it. But cool. Yeah, thanks for the intro. That's really, really nice to hear a little bit into who you are. But I just wanted to start by setting the context. So obviously, first, welcome to the podcast. It's lovely to have you.
Thank
you. Yeah,
nice
like I said, cool. I just want to set some context, because we've obviously had a discussion before this. So I just want to like catch people up a little bit. Some of the things, so obviously you work at Singular Systems, and some of the things that you said that your team values and invests a lot of time into getting right are these ideas of mentorship and career management, which I don't think are necessarily foreign concepts to people, but I think there's some interesting and unique ways in which you realize that in your team. And something which I'd like to understand in particular, which is what our conversation is going to be about today, is what those look like in real life in your team, but also to understand like how you've actually set them up, and the kind of impact that those structures actually have on your dev team, and what you do to make sure that it's 100% effective. And I think your position as more of a senior or a leader in this regard, I think, is also some interesting insight for other people who lead tech teams and dev teams, and can relate to needing to set something up like that. So just before we dive into those, when you talk about investing into your development team, or saying that it's just as important to invest into your team as it is into your tools or your software, what do you mean by that? Or why do you think that that's the case?
So it's kind of an age-old adage of, if you invest in your people, you know, the people will do things for you, right? So we live in a world where like tools and software solve problems, and that's kind of when technology first started. That was it. Oh, cool, buy this thing, this will solve your problem.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, if you add a heart to it, and you add some like realness to it, people will like, you know, be there for you, and they'll go the extra mile for you if they know that you value who they are as a person.
Right.
Seeing a person as like a resource is like the most hurtful thing, I think, in the whole world. Whereas rather like investing in people builds genuine relationships, it builds genuine care, I think, for people below that, which inspires them to go further. It's actually really easy to be a leader in that kind of world, where there's genuine care. Where there's no genuine care, then, you know, it becomes a salary at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, just to unpack that a little bit more, because I think this might be just an interesting thing to define. Like, what does investing into people mean? Like, why is buying a pro Asana subscription not investing into your people? Or something like, well, what does it actually mean to invest into people?
So it comes down to getting just to know who they are. So each person that you meet in the world is a different person. Myself, I'm like a career manager to, I think it's 5 people now. As of time of recording, it is 5 people. And all 5 of them are different. They come from different backgrounds. And investing into them is understanding at their core who they are and where they've come from, so that you can understand how best to guide them and to motivate them to, like, when they're having a bad day. Because when everyone's having a good day, it doesn't matter, right? Because then everyone's just, you know, everything's great. But when things are tough, like knowing who someone is, like even the smallest thing can make an impact. Like if someone's maybe more sentimental, like you can take that a certain way. If someone's, you know, maybe more quiet and they don't like being spotlighted, like you can find other ways for that person to shine without being like, cool, you have to do a training presentation, which I think is like, you know, tick a box. I mean, you know, there's ways to get past that. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, let's use that as a sort of dive-in point into what mentorship and career management actually looks. I think that getting to know people and how they think about stuff when they're struggling falls into that to some degree. So just sort of start by, I guess, just describing like what mentorship looks like in practice in your team in particular, like what sort of systems are set up for that.
Okay, so essentially, the way it works is we have these monthly sessions called contribution sessions, which is a very practical way to enforce a one-on-one conversation between 2 people. So I know some places call them one-on-ones, but we call them contribution sessions. Higher up from that is every 6 months we do a review, and then obviously every financial year there's a financial year review. So what we were finding is that there was quite a big disconnect between what executives were deciding at the top sort of level and what people actually understood was happening down on the ground. And this is where essentially career managers filled that gap. So I'm kind of just want to rather focus on like the contribution session side.
Cool.
So that's where like it's where you and the person who reports to you, like say I get given a brand new person, we will sit down and we'll say, okay, so let's talk about your goals for the next 6 months. Okay, we have a list of job roles and things, and how are we going to get you to be promoted, if that is in fact the person's ambition, because you would hopefully have built the relationship through things like having coffee and sort of more serendipity, by like understanding where they want to go with their life. So someone comes in and say, listen, Julian, I really love front end, but I'm not so good at front end. And I'll say, well, in the next 6 months, let's set that as a goal. And then every month on month, we will set tasks and we'll say, okay, what do we think realistically you can achieve in this month that satisfies both the business's goals and your goals? And me as the career manager, I look for those opportunities. So if on my project there's a front end opportunity, I can say, hey, person, you wanted to learn front end things. I have this opportunity. Here you go. Let's put it on your form. Let's get it in. So it's like, but you can't, like, all of that sort of stems from this relationship that you have to have with the person, because I don't know that you are interested in front end. I can't give you that kind of work, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'd love to dive into that contribution session from a practical level. And you sent me that doc, which I think I'll turn into something for the blog post linked in the show notes. But just before we do, what does, just tell me more about the impact that has on your development team, or even just the person who you're talking with. Like, what does that contribution session help them do better or do more of? Like, why is that so valuable? And maybe if you have like a story or an example from your own team where that's really shone through, like, be really cool to hear as well.
Cool. So essentially what it gives is an absolute level of clarity. Like there can be no confusion as to what is expected, because what often happens, why people get unhappy and why people ultimately leave companies, is if there's an expectation that's not managed and not reached. So the main goal of those sessions is to have on paper, what are your expectations and what do you need? So for example, I had a situation literally today that was resolved through, conveniently I had a contribution session today, and one of my people came to me, and we were actually on a run together on Monday, and he was saying how he was struggling juggling between two projects because he wasn't sure what his role was.
Right.
So I then went and spoke to the respective tech leads on those projects, and we sat in a session, and he feels way better about his life because he now has direction. We spoke about what is your role, what are you actually needing to do, and now he can go away and say, okay, well, if I'm being pulled in, like, so he was being expected to do a lot of training, or he thought he was being expected to do a lot of training, when he actually is not. There are other people on the team that need to fulfill that role.
Right.
So it was quite easy to say, listen, that's not actually your role. You need to focus on the following things. If this is coming into your life, these are the people you talk to. But that kind of clarity just is like, it's something that I know not a lot of places have. I know people who just like, I just do my 9 to 5. I pick up my tasks and I do them. I'm like, well, where are you going? What is your purpose?
Yeah. I mean, you've raised a very interesting point, which I just want to zoom in on for a quick sec. But that point of being really clear about expectations, I think it's got like a twofold benefit, right? Like it's really helpful for this person to sort of have the opportunity to say, I guess, firstly, this is what I expect from my role. These are the things I want to work towards in my career. And you mentioned it earlier, not everyone wants to be like promoted to tech manager. Some people want to, they specialize in their craft, or, move into like a very niche area, but you don't know that if you don't ask them. And then the other side of that is also, as you just said, that you can also communicate what the expectations of that person are and see whether it lines up with what they think they are doing. And if not, then it's a really cool surface area to say, cool, let's figure out what's going to work for you as an individual and for your team. Because otherwise, down the line, as you said, people leave because either they're imagining expectations, which for whatever reason came to be from like miscoms or like a project that they were put on. But this sort of brings that to the surface very early on, so that you have happier people all around, which I think is really cool. But as I said, I'd like to look into those contribution sessions a bit more practically. So like, what do you actually include in those contribution sessions? Or like, what are some of the different parts or sections within that?
Okay, so generally it tends to be like where we tend to work on 1 or 2 clients. So often it can be down to a task level on a client. So be like, okay, this month you need to build this endpoint on this API, right? So that's very much on the technical side, and that should align with the person's job role, so what they're actually meant to be doing, but also like that can also align with what they are aiming to improve. So like, for example, like I said, we at the performance review, we said like in the 6-month thing, we need to improve your technical ability. Cool, that should align with that. But also it doesn't have to just be technical stuff. I mean, I've had quite a few devs, and I'm sure there are many devs who know that being a sociable person isn't always the thing, and communication tends to be one of the skills a lot of people lack.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have had guys who've worked with me who've had communication on their list for a very long time. And every month it comes down to, all right, how many interactions did you have with this person? Or, even into team conflict, it's like, if two people aren't getting along, it's like, okay, cool. Why are you not getting along? Let's explore that. And then, every day be like, okay, how's it going with that? And before you send a message to that person, maybe send it to me first. Let's see, is this something you're making up in your head? And yeah, so soft skills also are very important in that, because that also needs to align with the job role. Or at least here, it's quite difficult to get promoted here only on technical ability. We believe in a sort of more holistic individual. So yeah, that is definitely something that we put down there, but it needs to be bite-sized, manageable tasks, I think, is what I would say.
So are those, just to make sure I'm understanding, are those tasks that you sort of set as a goal or a means for which that person to achieve the things that they want to work into? Like if you want to, I don't know, let's just use like a team lead, for example. If this person wants to work their way towards being a team lead, like one of their tasks needs to run a project or lead a project-based team or something. Is that how you set up those tasks, or?
Yes. So a 6-month goal might be like, okay, well, I want, by the end of the 6 months, I want to have led a team or at least been exposed to the leading of a team, right?
Cool.
So then a month-to-month thing would be like, okay, and we often like to use the phrase "I commit to" sort of like create that level of accountability. So you're saying, I commit to, and then if there's like a junior member on your team, like team leading starts, like if you're in the mid, which is probably where you would be pushing into that. I commit to like assisting or guiding junior members on my team, or, I commit to being involved in training of junior members on my team. So like, and then that is a task that you can do month to month. And when we do the retro, if in that month that opportunity hasn't come up for you, we can explore why. We can say, cool, is this something that is going to come up? Were we being naive? Like, again, realigning our expectations to say, cool, that's what we tried to do. This is what reality was. How close did we get? And then iterate and move forward.
That's cool. So it's sort of you figure out what goals this person wants to set, and then you help tease out the kinds of tasks this person can work on that help them realize that goal. Either, you break it down, like you said, into bite-sized month-to-month things, so that your main task is not, I have led a team, because that's quite a big, scary task to just jump into. What else do you include in those contribution sessions? What other I guess principles do you follow in there?
So I'm not sure if I just have a stab at that, but essentially I think it's like it needs to align essentially with where the company is going as well, like from a values perspective, right? So like everything essentially will boil down to the goal set at the 6 months, but also like it will have to align with what is required for the client. So for example, if you want to be a front-end dev and you are on a project that doesn't have a front end, like that is where we can also talk about things like, okay, well, what could you do on the side that value adds? What extra stuff could you bring to the world? And how does that align with what we are looking for? So for example, we had a guy here who was on a project that was quite SQL heavy, and he decided to build an onboarding platform for our new starters. Fully front end, all that stuff, just so that he had that kind of exposure.
Very cool.
And yeah, so that was quite a nice thing to have on that form. But generally it comes down to like bite-sized tasks, things that align with the 6-month goal.
And so you said, and I really like that you tied the social or the softer skills aspect into this idea of career development, because I think people sometimes get quite stuck on titles and not so much on like a holistic view of skills that someone might need. Do you sometimes make those tasks related to those kinds of soft skills as well? And if so, like how do those look? Like, is it like I have coffee with the entire team in 6 months? Like how do you sort of phrase those?
Yeah, so I think it can even be like relationship based. So like if you and like for example, someone like myself who is in charge of people, if I'm struggling with a relationship with someone, like very much there could be a task in there, which is, listen, you need to improve that relationship. I mean, like one of my 6 month goals is to build more of a relationship with some of our Joburg team, because as Cape Town, we're a little bit isolated.
Yeah.
So that is cool. So month to month, how can I interact with them? Okay, we've got a thing called clans, which is across branches, which is nice. So from that, I get some interaction with that team. So there's a thing. It's like I will attend clan meetings, or I commit to attending clan meetings, or that kind of stuff. But very much so, like in a weird kind of way, almost anything could be on your contribution session form. Its relevance is kind of validated against what happens at the 6 month mark. So for example, if you're super into game dev, if you wanted to put that on your contribution session form, you are more than welcome to, but that's not going to assist you in hitting your 6 month goals. Because if you're into game development, we're not into game development. As cool as it is, we are a fintech company. And if you can bring elements of gamification into things, different conversation. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that wouldn't be something that I would say would go there. I think it's still within the workspace, but very, very generic.
But I still think that's interesting because you're still giving them opportunity to bring that to work. It's not like saying that they have, if someone really likes game dev, if they can still practice that to a level where they are getting the value from that, then they can still work for a fintech company. They don't have to leave your team in order to look for new. You can actually like grow your career in your current team, which I think speaks to retention and helping people like level up where they are. Which I think is also a very interesting point. The one thing I wanted to touch on, it's almost like a two-part question. How often do you have these contribution sessions? And could you also tell me a bit about those retros? Like how is that loop close properly?
Okay, so contribution sessions, when we started out this journey, we were like, oh, they'll just be quick 15-minute chats, 7 minutes retro, 7 minutes planning, and then we go.
Cool.
That is that was impossible. So we've now made them be half an hour at the most, but you must prep like for your contribution session. And the first 15 minutes will be a retro. They occur every month, to sort of pop in your first question there. They occur every month, and then you start off and you open last month's form, which the person has filled out before with their retro comments. And then you open the new form as well. And then you go through and you say, all right, and you literally line by line, how did this go? How did this go? How does this go? And it's not like a slap on the wrist, like, oh, naughty, you didn't do 4 out of the 5 things you said. It's so you didn't get to these 4 things. What came up? And it's also an opportunity to add other things. So we obviously have live clients and stuff. Live support is a real thing. If you spent your month doing live support and you didn't get to any of your actual tasks, that is a red flag. And hopefully you've spoken up before the session about it. But at the very least, we'll catch it in the session of what is going on that project, because that shouldn't be a reality. And then essentially that retro is very much what happened over the last month, just so that we have a touch point. Ideally, you would be having conversations with your career manager way more frequently. It should we don't enforce anything in terms of like it must be week to week, because everyone's different relationships, different needs. Like if you're managing someone who's on your work team, it's a lot easier. You will likely see them every day in a stand-up.
For sure.
Whereas like someone who's not on your team, maybe you need to be a bit more like what's the word? A bit more structured about it, and have like maybe a setup week on week thing, like I have with one of my people as well.
So I think, that's another cool principle just to throw in there, is that flexibility. And I think you alluded to it like right at the beginning about like having that there's no one size fits all approach for support structures or career management or career development. That you have to sort of, and if you know people well enough, you can I guess build that flexibility in so that it actually suits that person. But I think the monthly cadence is interesting because that also explains why some of the tasks are more of a monthly thing. And if you're doing it weekly, you could actually have weekly tasks if you wanted to, if they are manageable and fit the goal that you're going for. So that's cool. And then is there anything else that we haven't spoken about when it comes to retros? Like what else is really important for you to hit in that retro? I assume there's some sort of like lessons learned from past months and building those in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it is definitely like did something roll over and like, or like say for example, you did finish your task, but the task came back twice from UAT or something. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so now on your next form it'll be like, rather do less tasks but focus on your quality, or oh, your unit tests didn't work or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's very much that kind of iteration on iteration. The other thing that's quite nice is if someone has had a good month, we have essentially like these little ratings at the bottom. You're either a superstar or a solid citizen or coachable or like, yeah, I can't remember what the red one is. I've never had to use it, fortunately. But like, it's also just a nice way to have like a bit of a metric. Like if someone's done everything on their form and then more, you're a superstar. If you've done everything on your form, you're a solid citizen. And then the other one is if things are tough. But again, all of those things just serve as a touch point to have a conversation. Like most of the time, a contribution session is a touch point to have the conversation about how things are going. And like I said, like you would hope that you've built that relationship to a point where you don't need just that touch point. But sometimes that's all that at least every month, not every 6 months, which is what we used to have.
Right. So the general sense that I'm getting is that these sessions are quite relaxed and quite conversational, all the way from the sort of setup to the fact that you don't have like a strict metric or a key result or a KPI or something, and that your rating system is like can almost be condensed into an emoji, if I'm to put it bluntly. But why? Because I know the other end of the spectrum, which I think I've seen at some companies before, is it's very like structured. You get like scores, you build that in. Why have you opted for that, or your way, as opposed to that way? What benefit do you see in that?
I think being too structured doesn't allow room for understanding in someone's life, right? So like if your KPI was like, also dev is kind of unstructured at times. I mean, like if like the KPI is, okay, cool, you need to have completed 4 tasks this month, right? And something happens in your life and you only do 2 or 1 or whatever, like having that as a hard no X, you are in trouble. Like it's just uncaring. And like we try and have a bit more empathy this side. It's more like, okay, we understand that things have gone wrong in your life. Maybe you're being divorced or split from your partner, whatever. Those things happen, right? Life happens. And the sign of more relaxed scoring is for that. But we've also found that having just the tasks on the form, like because our reviews are every 6 months, in that final review, which is where we talk about things like promotion and that stuff, just knowing what you've done over the last 6 months in a physical form, like you've written it down, you know what's all in there, you can have a fair conversation about what happened the last 6 months. Because if you don't have that, right, or even if you have hard metrics, it just causes frustration because, like I was saying earlier, you've got a shy person, right? Maybe a thing is you have to do 2 training sessions. That person is absolutely screwed. They have no chance because they will never do that. Whereas like with this way, we at least have some gray area there, some subjectivity, where because we're understanding the person behind the form,
Yeah. So I guess if I'm hearing correctly, it's less about, what's less important is the, for lack of a better word, the score that someone gets on every task that they set out to do, but rather the fact that you've gone through this process of like setting tasks and then reviewing your progress and setting tasks and reviewing progress, so that when you get to 6 months, the person might even have a better idea and say, you know what I said I wanted to do 6 months ago? I actually had a complete change of heart these last 6 months. I really want to focus on this thing, but at least you have that thing to show for. And it's not all, I mean, it goes back to your expectation point. It's not all in your head and you have to like assume and guess and all that kind of stuff. You've actually got like a thing to talk about, which, I mean, you said it yourself, it's like you actually have a conversation there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that we're not holding people accountable, right? If you said you've committed to a task and you just haven't, we have to have that conversation. We have to say, listen, right, what's going on? Why didn't you get there? And accountability sometimes has a sort of negative connotation to it, I think, in some things, like, but it doesn't have to. Like accountability just means owning what you've done and understanding like not necessarily making excuses. Like if you didn't get to something because you didn't get something, you can say that and we'll say, all right, so did we plan this month wrong? Like what was it? What, and like I said, it's that reason behind why something didn't occur. Yeah.
So just to sort of close the loop on this, I've got two final questions. The first one is, over the months, years that you've done this, like what has been like the single most impactful thing that a, I guess, mentorship career development system has done for your development team?
I would definitely say just the management of expectations has been crucial, and the building of relationships from that. Like we have quite a smallish team in Cape Town, but I think our Joburg branch is much the same, but I can't really speak too much for them, so I'm just going to focus on us. But our team tends to have more genuine relationships because of like these sessions and the management of those expectations. So I think we've had less nasty surprises come review time. So before this, we used to have, like I was saying, we used to have every 6 months, we would have a review, and we would have people who would be unhappy solidly for 6 months, get to their review and just open the chest and just lay it all out and be like, I can't work with this person or this. And you sit there shocked because you don't know what's coming, where this is from. And these contribution sessions eliminate that completely, because from month one, someone's like, you put me on this team, this person and I, we are not getting along. And I can have a conversation there already and go, right, let's unpack that. Why aren't you getting along? Not necessarily in that session, but at least we know, So that's sort of, I would just say like the clarity, the expectations, or clarity around expectations, I guess, clarity, and generally a happier team.
Yeah, and it's probably even more the case remote, when 6 months you don't see someone really. They sort of, you have check-ins, but you don't get to pick up on the faces in the office or someone looking disgruntled. It's easier to like miss those. So I think that probably helps with that as well. And then just the last question I had was, what's like the one thing that you wish more people knew about, I guess, career development, specifically for developers or software engineers? Like what do you wish, having done this, that more people knew?
I guess it's that, like, I kind of want to say like the cliche of investing in people is, more important than investing in anything else. But it's essentially, your focus needs to be on growing your people, like, especially at a senior level. Like senior devs, like I've had days where I spent most of my day training and assisting and helping people grow. And like looking after people that way, as someone who identifies essentially as a millennial, even though I don't know if I am, because I don't think anyone does, all I've ever looked for in my life, in my career, is like someone to help guide me. And that level of guidance is worth its weight in gold, essentially. Like you can have a salary, like you can have a massive salary at a corporate and have hardcore KPIs where you must finish 10 tasks a month and collect your salary if that's what you want to do, but you will not feel as fulfilled, I think, as you do if you are in a place where someone will be a mentor, a guide, who will like care enough about you. Like, so for example, I had a couple of these kinds of stories, but like, someone who's willing to grow, like I said, that even the soft skills, like that growth in that, for devs especially, who tend to be very closed, enjoy the online keyboard hiding away situation. Like, having those real genuine relationships is so rewarding. I mean, it's when things like, we had a lady here who, she had to put her dog of like 13 years down, for example. She got so much love and support from people around. Like at other places, you don't get that. They're like, oh, sorry, lol, or whatever. But so I think it's definitely that. It's focusing on growth is never a bad idea. Never.
Julian, thank you so much for your insight and, I guess, experience with having had to go through actually setting this up and switching from a system that wasn't ideal to this like much better system. I think it's really cool to hear from someone who's been in the trenches, so that anyone who's struggling can have some sort of, I guess, North Star to work towards, or at least some inspiration for ways that they can adapt or change their system. So really do appreciate you sharing all of that. It's really cool.
Thanks. I mean, it's also, it's difficult. It's not like it's easy. Like, I mean, As with all things, takes effort, takes practice, but the rewards are so worth it.